Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to our 1111 Tech Takes Live in the Console series. Today's session is all about production hosting cloud infrastructure, often referred to as IaaS or infrastructure as a service. And the goal of today's conversation is going to be really talking about the priorities that a lot of organizations have when moving to the cloud, some of the challenges they face, some of the new complexities with licensing and migration strategies, walk you through some key components of the 1111 Cloud Infrastructure Platform, as well as a demo of our Cloud Console, and then an offer for free trial at the end today. Where I'd love to start the discussion with you today, though, is talking really about why organizations are moving to the cloud. Now, I'm going to pop up a few animations on the screen here as I talk about this. There are thousands of reasons that organizations move to the cloud, but what I've got here are some of the most common ones that we see talking to the numerous customers we have as one of the largest VMware cloud providers in the world. A lot of organizations start running a little bit long in the tooth in terms of the production hardware they have on premises, hardware refreshes, renewals, running out of capacity. So a lot of organizations look to move to the cloud to get better performance, or maybe have access to newer processes or newer technologies to enhance security, as all organizations are looking to do more about cyber resilience. And of course, you could join some of our other sessions to learn more about backup or DR on this topic. Another component as well, though, is a lot of organizations find that they're growing quickly or want to approach new markets, and so they want to be able to deploy quicker, to have a better reach, maybe even have a more global geographic reach to access new customers or give a better quality experience of that technology to organizations they're working with. But of course, they also have this goal of how can I make not only performance better, but the uptime, the access, the availability, and ultimately maybe the recovery better at the same time. They want their customers to be happy as there's numerous alternatives to maybe the approach they take to technology. But if we're being honest, one of the biggest drivers for a lot of organizations as well is to try to optimize cost, or at least the perception that moving to the cloud may optimize costs. We'll talk about that a little bit as we go through the conversation today. But ultimately, when an organization is looking at what do I do with my production environment, it often comes down to three choices. And those choices can really be around, well, hey, do I go ahead and do hardware refresh? Does it make sense to keep some components on premises or in a data center environment? Do I look at a hyperscaler environment, whether that be an Amazon or Azure or Google Cloud or many other hyperscalers out there? We'll talk more about the pros and cons there in just a moment. Or do we look at something like a VMware-based cloud provider like 1111 Systems, for example? And again, we'll talk about this in just a moment. The first one I want to talk about just right off the bat is how a do-it-yourself approach or hardware refresh may be disadvantageous to you as an organization. Let's talk a little bit about why that might be the case. Well, you may have experienced this yourself, but as you probably know, there's a lot on your shoulders. There's a lot of burden to providing that positive customer experience, and often why saving money is perceived as a path when you go to the cloud, because when you do it yourself, there is a lot on your hands, right? There's the infrastructure itself. There's a lot, and we'll talk about licensing here in a minute, but there's a lot of complexity when it comes to licensing, support models, the people costs, and ultimately, whether supply chain delays or lack of staffing or other things like that. Needless to say, you've probably experienced this. There's a lot of challenges to doing it yourself. Our approach on the 1111 side, and really the promise of the cloud as a whole, is you can get that great customer experience and innovation for your team members, for your customers, but really just by subscribing to the right size compute and resources. And that right sizing is a really important component. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. Because obviously the question here is, okay, if the cloud is a better path, is any cloud the right choice, or does it make a difference which cloud you go to? And there's a great quote here. This is from a VMware and Gartner survey from a few years back. This says, hey, a lot of organizations think that they're going to move to the cloud and save money. However, there's really a couple components to it where moving to the cloud may actually introduce a lot of cost up front, or it may take a lot of time to recoup the cost of moving to the cloud. We'll talk about this a little bit more in just a moment here, but just always bear in mind with the migration component of the cloud, there can be some significant challenges there. The other thing to consider here is there's a lot of compelling reasons to maybe make that change to the cloud, right? Even more so than that list that we talked about a moment ago. In the last year, there have been changes to a lot of licensing, and while a lot of organizations use VMware, after an acquisition, there's been a lot of customers that have been reassessing and saying, hey, with changes to my licensing costs or moving from a perpetual to subscription-only option, or having a certain bundling of resources that I may or may not want to have access to, should I make a change? So maybe you're watching this conversation today, and you are one of the many customers that have reassessed, do I re-up my subscription or do I make a modification to that? Do I go to maybe a different technology? If I need to stay on premises, do I change to a different hypervisor or a different technology to power my infrastructure? Should I look at a VMware-based cloud provider like an 1111 system? Should I look at a hyperscaler? And there are pros and cons to each. If you are a VMware customer, one thing that you need to think about, and this kind of blends right back into that, will a migration add additional cost to you, is moving to a different technology may mean that the expertise, the capabilities that you have in-house with your staff today, the technology, the ecosystem that you rely on, the day two experience, the migration component, all of this can be very, very different if you move to a new cloud environment. So as part of your approach when you're looking at a production cloud environment, you should really consider with yourself, what do I have today? What is driving this approach? What will this budget impact look like from a licensing, from a renewal, from a hardware perspective? When will things align where it might make sense to make that move? Am I leveraging things from a VMware technology perspective or any other proprietary or vendors that I really have invested heavily in or have significant expertise in? You should look at different service providers because they are not all made the same, and look at what capabilities and which technologies they can leverage. 1111, for example, while we have numerous global VMware-based deployments today and can make for a very simple migration, we'll talk more about this in a moment, we also have fully managed options when it comes to AWS Azure migration services. So look at service providers and what they can do, because oftentimes migrations can be a significant challenge. We'll show more on this next slide. And then your team's ability to maintain and manage the environment after the move is also important. That's where that VMware to VMware migration when you're going to the cloud can be really important. So what sort of impact can it have from a migration perspective? Well, it may be shocking to hear, but it really can delay a return on investment by a number of years. And this can be impacted by, do you have to convert anything to get it to the cloud? Do you have to pay for migration services that may be far more complex or costly if you are making technological or architectural changes to it? Are you going to have a totally different billing model that may introduce new approaches there? And so when you're looking at cloud environments as a production hosting component, it may make sense to look at what makes sense to keep on premises as a more selective scenario. But when you're looking at the cloud, are there things that would do better in a hyperscaler environment? Are there things that would do better in a VMware-based environment? And where does your team expertise and customer demand really come into play there, so that you don't move things to a cloud where it may introduce costs without introducing return for your organization? The 1111 approach to migration is a really planned, well-executed approach where we actually have an in-house tool called Catalyst that we use to assess, to look at sizing, compatibility, connectivity, and make sure that your environment will move well into the 1111 environment. We've dedicated account managers to make this process work well for you, who have done thousands of different deployments related to cloud migration, data protection, disaster recovery. We have the ability for us to put the technology, the data mover, in place for you as part of the migration process, to be able to do a validation or a test prior to production cutover, which is really critical to make sure it works well for you. We have an exceptional technology team when it comes to support. And then, of course, we have the 1111 Cloud Console, which I'll show for you here in just a couple of minutes, which is your day two experience, which allows for your team's expertise to really shine through at the end of the day. For organizations that are looking for a little bit more help, though, whether it's in our cloud or others, we also offer managed database, managed OSs, and managed infrastructure that can allow for us to do a little bit more within the environment related to day-to-day tasks in terms of OS, application health, and the underlying infrastructure, of course, at the end of the day. We want to make sure that you and your staff have the time to focus on business value innovation while we take care of the infrastructure layers itself. So this is an option for our infrastructure as well as AWS or Azure environments, which, as I mentioned before, we can also do a fully managed approach and have migration services for those. When you're thinking about the 1111 environments, though, do know that we have dozens of different certifications, frameworks, attestations to make sure that we can keep you in compliance at those environments there. But as I was mentioned before, one of the really powerful things about our infrastructure stack is the 1111 Cloud Console. We'll show you a little bit more of a demo here in just a moment, but some really key components that I wanted to talk through at a high level here is the 1111 Cloud Console, while we're focusing today on production hosting, is really meant to power everything within an IT infrastructure. So if you've joined us for previous Take 30 sessions, what you have seen is that we can do management of 365 backup and recovery, on-prem to the cloud backup and recovery, disaster recovery in which a customer can replicate their production environment and restore in our environment in a matter of minutes using fully orchestrated runbooks, testing, isolation, all of that good stuff as well. Now today, what we'll show in the console here in a few minutes is the 1111 Cloud Console can also be used for production purposes in which your organization has access to a full production VMware-powered environment within this Cloud Console where networking management, production host, security, billing, disaster recovery, backup, all those elements are built in the console to make for a really seamless experience and a really complete experience for your organization. Now, a couple of those highlights, and again, we will walk through this live here in a moment as well, is making it make sense. As you may have heard or may have experienced yourself, sometimes when organizations move to the cloud, they find that they might need a degree just to be able to read what their bill looks like. And oftentimes, this comes from the fact that a lot of cloud providers out there have an approach where when you move to their environment, there's a cost for the resource, and then there's a cost for how you use that resource. So I'll give a quick example. When you move to the cloud, even something as simple as object storage, you may or may not be surprised to find that object storage often has a cost for the storage and then a pay for how many reads, how many writes, ingress, egress sort of usage that can add quite a bit to it. Like many of the other 1111 services, when we talk about 1111's IaaS or production cloud hosting, there's much more of an all-inclusive approach to the way it works, where there's a lot less surprise billing and a lot more transparency and visibility for you, which is, of course, a key component at the end of the day. When you move resources from on-prem to the cloud, connectivity becomes a really big component. And for some of you watching this, that makes absolute sense. For some of you, that may be a new consideration. But resources which were previously in a data center or in your local environment are now in a hosted environment. So your ability to make sure that your end users, your customers, your employees have secure access but still have a very highly performant environment is a critical component. Within the 1111 cloud infrastructure, we build in networking to the environment where you have access to VMware-based firewall appliances, you have all-inclusive bandwidth, but also have the ability, and we'll show more about this in the cloud infrastructure here in a moment, to bring in your own network appliances to leverage and get access to hundreds of different carrier circuits, diversity through 1111, potentially bringing your own, and really make sure that there are no hurdles from a networking perspective to you and the success that you have as an organization. When it comes to the speed at getting that time to market, right? We talked about that being a key driver to organizations moving to the cloud. Because we are a VMware-based environment, what we find often is that organizations come to us and say, hey, we've already built out templates. We've already built out workloads in our VMware-based environment. How can I quickly spin those up and make them operational in 1111? The simple answer is we provide pre-built templates, but we also have the ability for customers to import their own. We also include at no additional cost Windows Data Center additional licensing for the OS, making it really simple for using our templates to build a Windows-based or other operating system-based environments with a couple clicks, or to take infrastructure that's working well in your current environment and port it over to ours in a matter of minutes. And again, that time to value and not introducing significant costs for migrations is a really critical component and consideration. We'll show a bit more about this in the live demonstration in a moment, but one thing that you always need to consider when you move to any cloud environment, whether it's ours or some of the other leading providers out there, is you still need to have data protection in a cloud environment. And 1111, if you've joined our other sessions or you know about us as an organization, are very well known in the space for backup, disaster recovery, cloud hosting. So our cloud hosting, of course, has a lot when it comes to data protection built into this. So this would include the ability to say, hey, when you move to 1111, you begin hosting with us, you actually have our advanced backup capabilities built into the console, allowing for your organization to customize backup, but also to be able to do instant mass recovery of virtual machines, files, folders, disk, other elements like that with a couple clicks in a self-service fashion to make recovery incredibly easy, or even be able to do testing, QA, test dev, other things like that, leveraging clones or recovered virtual guests. So a lot of flexibility and a lot of power with that data protection. As we mentioned before, when you migrate into our platform, you get access to exceptional support of 1111 employees who are actually certified technicians, where you could talk to them and reach them in a number of ways. But knowing that, of course, one of the big components of the console itself is not just the support we provide, but your self-service access, I'm going to switch over here for just a moment and actually show you a little bit of a demo in the Cloud Console, and then we'll wrap up with a few details around pricing, availability, and of course that free trial for this service as well. So let me share out my screen here, and we will take a look at this in action. All right, beautiful. So what you're seeing here is an example of the 1111 Cloud Console. And as I've mentioned before, if you've joined us on previous sessions, the 1111 Cloud Console can manage a number of different services. In my particular environment, I have object storage, and if you haven't heard or seen, 1111 has a AWS object storage powered service and solution that is incredible. Premium support, premium storage without the premium price, and all-inclusive service. We also have the ability to do, as I mentioned before, DR 365 on-prem backup, or of course production hosting. And depending on what service you subscribe to with 1111, you'll see different products or services here, and simply toggling will allow you to see other environments and other details. Of course, with our theme today being production hosting, I will leave it on the production hosting tab. Now, I'll be brief in this demonstration. We are more than happy to talk to you more in depth one-on-one. Feel free to reach out to us or take a look at that QR code at the end of our session today to get your hands on this. But really the goal here is to show you what that day two experience looks like. Again, we offer managed migration for our customers. We offer the ability to pull templates directly into our environment. What I want to show you a few minutes of is, after you've moved into the environment, what does it look like to actually leverage? Well, some things that I commonly hear of organizations that move into our cloud is it's so intuitive because it looks and feels just like an extension of their on-premises VMware-based environment. And for all means and purposes, it really is. The 1111 environments, like I said, we offer AWS and Azure environments, but our cloud environments being powered by VMware with our 1111 Cloud Console overlay on top means that your employees that know how to leverage VMware, that are certified, will be able to use this platform in a matter of minutes. They have their virtual guests within the environment that they can use just like normal virtual machines. All the controls and capabilities that they have on premises to get their work done, to modify things to meet their needs, are built within the platform. So troubleshooting through a console, resizing a machine, adding more performance, cloning it, making deployments into templates, making things quicker, all those things are capable and available for your team, saving a lot of time and saving a lot of retraining and relearning while keeping it very functional. As I mentioned before, you have the ability to have your own catalog. You can import machines and applications that have been working within your environment. You can use our managed migration or a combination of the two. Once the virtual guests are running within the environment, as we mentioned before, your organization has access to virtual networking through our environment with unlimited inbound and outbound bandwidth built in. The ability to bring in your own appliances. For example, if you're a Fortinet shop or Cisco shop, you can bring your own. You can also get licensing for those appliances through us and fully managed options through us. You could bring in other third-party appliances, virtual appliances as well. While we provide unlimited inbound and outbound networking for our organizations, we find some customers have certain carriers or want to have direct connects. With us being a very large AWS partner, we actually offer the ability to do direct connects into Amazon to allow for more of a hybrid cloud experience as well. So feel free to reach out to us and chat with us on that. But connectivity is a really critical component. We mentioned before that we have the ability in our platform to do not only backup, but we can also do what we call cloud-to-cloud replication, where 1111 can actually replicate your guests to another one of our geographic regions to allow you to have site redundancy with our production hosting as well, or the ability to do those local backups or a combination of the two to get the resilience level you would like. While 1111 offers fully managed security services, built into our console at no additional cost is also a self-service security platform in which our production hosting and DR customers have access to on-demand vulnerability scanning, malware and antivirus tools and monitoring, and other services related to security at no additional cost, or of course access to fully managed networking services as well. And as I mentioned earlier on in the conversation, the billing is incredibly easy and straightforward to read. With this particular demo environment, I don't have a contract associated, so you'll have to think back to that colorful slide. I'll show you that in a moment. But very straightforward to be able to understand usage estimates and why and what you're paying for. But most customers, and I'll show you this breakdown on our pricing slide here in a moment, reserve resources and have a very straightforward billing experience as a whole. So with that quick overview, hopefully you can see here just how easy it is for organizations to come in, and whether they're migrating their guests, importing them, or deploying new guests within the environment, the look, the feel, the control is very, very similar, very, very powerful to the on-premises environment, and a great extension for your team to get up and running very quickly. Knowing how important end-user access, performance, and security are, we really make sure that the networking tools, the replication, the backup tools, and the security, whether it's self-service or fully managed, are all built in. One final component that's really critical as well is we offer a very robust user management experience where organizations have the ability to do role-based access control and give very granular permissions to say, maybe a network admin only needs to see the virtual machines or virtual networks. Maybe a SQL admin should only see a SQL guest. Can we tie into existing authentication services that you have on-prem today or in the cloud today? We want to make sure this is an extension of your environment, and our role-based access control can do an exceptional job on that. So again, very difficult to do all that in a couple of minutes, but hopefully that gives you an idea of the power of our console, the capabilities your team will have, and will allow you to dig in a little bit deeper on a call with us or through a demo with us in the future, or trial with us in the future. So let me go ahead and stop sharing the console for a minute, and we'll wrap up today with a few final details around the service. So as I mentioned before, all-inclusive is really a theme with a lot of 1111 services, and that's a term that gets thrown around a lot, so I want to make sure that I clarify what I mean by that. For many of our organizations to work with us, they will leverage this tool called Catalyst, which does a cost compatibility and connectivity assessment of their environment. A lot of organizations will reserve the storage that they're going to be using for production purposes, and then rather than having to do instance sizing or have certain sort of pizza box combinations of CPU and RAM, with 1111 we instead do a resource pool. This is the exact amount of resources you use, and we find for most organizations it's far more efficient, saves them a significant amount of money, but provides them a lot more flexibility as well, a lot more compatibility without having to resize machines to bring them in. But included at no additional cost, of course, is the networking, the bandwidth. If you're using our bandwidth, you can also get additional carriers or direct connects through us as well. The core security, you can have access to additional managed security or managed replication and protection. and of course the support, compliance, and unlimited number of VMs within that resource pool. At the end of the day, right, we know that organizations make decisions really for three reasons. So when you're thinking about production hosting and you're thinking about cloud providers, while 1111 can help, whether it's AWS or Azure, but certainly with the VMware environment, some key things that we do is we can help reduce risk. As you saw and heard me talk about a little bit today, we have our replication, we have integrated backups, we have strong compliance, a great built-in security suite, but also exceptional managed security capabilities as well. We help organizations save money or optimize their spend by really understanding the right amount of resources that you need using our in-house Catalyst tool, and really have a much more comprehensive, all-inclusive model where you don't have a lot of surprise billing at the end of the month. Because at the end of the day, we really want you to focus on driving revenue and innovation so we can offer a much faster time to market and really let your staff take advantage of the knowledge they already have. An exceptional number of sites globally to be able to power your cloud hosting through, and a lot of expertise, support, and services that you can leverage along the way. So in closing, I'd love to encourage you to try us out. If you saw something that was interesting to you today, you can take a quick screen grab of that QR code, or you can go to 1111systems.com/test drive to get started. And while we highlighted today our 1111 production hosting, you'll see additional test drive options and opportunities on that page as well. So scan that code or go to that URL, or feel free to reach out to us with more questions. But I hope this was educational for you today on, while the cloud provides a lot of great options for production hosting, the right cloud can make a difference, and the right combination of people, process, and technology will really drive that. Thank you so much for joining us today. Feel free to check out another one of our sessions, and we'll talk to you in the near future. Thanks all.